In continuation of our celebration of Black LGBTQ pioneers, we look to the remarkable accomplishments and historic contributions of individuals who have made their mark on the world. From the arts to activism, these individuals have helped to shape the nation we know today and the culture we find ourselves a part of. While they grew up in very different places and were of different times, their impact is still felt today. In no particular order, here is part 2 of LGBTQ pioneers you should explore. The first pioneer on today's list is Miss Major Griffin Gracie. Miss Major Griffin Gracie was born on the south side of Chicago on October 25, 1940. Miss Major, now known to many as Mama, was assigned male at birth, but as she grew up participating in drag balls that she described as phenomenal, like going to the Oscars, she acknowledged that the identity given at birth didn't represent who she truly was. However, in that time, herself and her peers had limited terminology surrounding gender identities to accurately express how they all felt. That being said, the bullying she experienced in her youth and the antagonism from institutions, being kicked out of college twice for the expression of her identity, did not dissuade her from expressing who she truly was, but rather fueled the fire of her activism. In New York, she became a primary figure of the Stonewall protest, and in San Francisco, she joined the Transgender Variant and Intersex Justice Project as a staff organizer and later an executive director. Outspoken against the prison system and its contributions to the incarceration of trans people of color and those with low incomes. Now 80, she continues to be a vocal activist today. Here's Miss Major talking about her start as a political activist on Studio Q.
I always cared about the girls earlier due to the fact that we were getting murdered so much and nobody seemed to care. I lost a lot of good friends. But I think I became aware and awake when I was in Attica and Dannemora when I met James Black. It affected me when I was in Dannemora in the hole and I met the men who had started the Attica riot. And in talking and meeting with them there, got to listen to the abuses that the police were putting them through. And you're there 23 hours out of the day, so we wound up talking to one another. They were very open. They didn't treat me any different, knowing that I was at the time, transgender wasn't a very popular word, so that I was this sissy down the cell block from them. So we talked, and in talking to them, he made me aware of the fact that what I was doing was important, but I needed to know the reasons why it had gotten this bad and what I could do to really help my community versus giving them a Band-Aid over a cut. It makes me feel alive and recharges my battery to keep going because I'm still here and this stuff still has to change and I need to keep doing what I'm doing because there's other girls out there, young girls who need to know that they come from a history, that this didn't start with Janet Mock and Laverne Cox. This has been years in the making, that we're in the Bible, you know, and that we've been here since time began.
Another lifelong activist who used writing as her own method of expression was Audrey Lord. Audrey Geraldine Lord was born in New York City to Caribbean immigrant parents on February 18, 1934. Nearsighted to the degree of legally blind, Lord grew up listening to her mother's stories of the West Indies, learning to write and speak from her teachings, and crafting her own first poem in the 8th grade. From there, her writing and creativity flourished. A self-described Black lesbian, feminist, mother, poet, and warrior, Lord wrote across genres and fields of feminist theory, poetry, and critical race studies for those women who do not speak, for those who do not have a voice because they were terrified, and because we are taught to respect fear more than ourselves. Lord wrote not to shy away from difficult subjects, but to shed light on their complexities. Here's Lord reading an excerpt from her writing on being a lesbian in the village.
Downtown, in the gay bars, I was a closet student, an invisible black. Uptown, at Hunter, I was a closet dyke and a general intruder. Maybe 4 people altogether knew I wrote poetry, and I usually made it pretty easy for them to forget it. It was not that I didn't have friends, and good ones. There was a loose group of young lesbians, white except for Flea and I, who hung out together, apart from whatever piece of the straight world we each had a separate place in. We not only believed in the reality of sisterhood, that word which was to be so abused 2 decades later, but we also tried to put it into practice with varying results. We cared for and about each other, sometimes with more or less understanding, regardless of who was entangled with whom at any given time. And there was always a place to sleep and something to eat and a listening ear for anyone who wandered into the crew. And there was always somebody calling you up on the telephone to interrupt those fantasies of suicide. And that is as good a working definition of friend as most.
Another activist born nearly 2 decades after Lord was Phil Wilson. Phil Wilson was born in Chicago on April 22, 1956, to activist parents who taught him the importance of a supportive family and engagement in the community. This early involvement made him privy to the inner workings of activist efforts for the civil rights movement at a very young age. However, what drove him on his own path to activism came after he and his partner Chris Brownlee were both diagnosed with HIV in the early 1980s, during the onset of the AIDS epidemic. Following his partner's death from HIV-related illnesses in 1989, Wilson's feeling that the Black community and country at large were not unified against the horrible epidemic, calling it the gay disease, spurred his more resolute activism that culminated in founding the Black AIDS Institute in 1999. Wilson was appointed in 2010 to President Obama's Advisory Council on HIV and AIDS. His lifelong efforts to inform, educate, and mobilize communities to act against AIDS continues today. Here is a snapshot of Wilson's commentary on addressing HIV and AIDS in the Black community.
As early as 1986, Black people were disproportionately impacted by HIV. We were 25% of folks impacted by HIV in 1986. And yet, the response in Black communities and the delivery of services at that time, primarily prevention and awareness services to Black communities, were disproportionately low. So at that point, I decided that it was imperative for me to at least be one of the voices that raised the issue around HIV in a Black context. And the only way that we're going to solve this problem in our country is by solving the problem in Black America. Black America represents 10 to 12% of the U.S. population, and yet we're nearly 50% of the estimated 1.2 million Americans living with HIV. We're around 50% of the annual new cases, and we're around 50% of the annual AIDS-related deaths. No matter how you look at it, through the lens of gender or sexual orientation or age or socioeconomic class or level of education or region of the country where you live, Black people bear the brunt of the AIDS epidemic in America today. If we fail at ending the AIDS epidemic in Black America, we fail at ending the AIDS epidemic in America.
Representing a different voice in the LGBTQ rights movement is Laverne Cox. Born an identical twin on May 29, 1979 in Mobile, Alabama, Laverne Cox is an actress and outspoken LGBTQ advocate, rising to prominence from her role as Sophia Bursette on the Netflix original series Orange is the New Black. The show documented the harsh transition of a transgender woman in a prison environment. With the help of her brother, Lamar playing the pre-transition Sophia as Marcus, the role had Laverne nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award, becoming the first openly transgender person to do so. Known as a trailblazer in the LGBTQ community, Laverne has won awards not only for her acting, but for her activism as well. Perhaps most notably, as a convergence of the two, she won a Daytime Emmy Award for Laverne Cox Presents the T-Word. Here's Laverne Cox on BET's Black Coffee discussing how we can ensure unity within the Black community for trans and all LGBTQ people.
I think it starts with the humanity of LGBTQ people in general, the humanity of trans people. I think for my cis Black sisters, my non-trans sisters, my womanhood is not a threat to any other woman's womanhood. There's a history, I think we have to acknowledge the history and the trauma around how Black womanhood is disavowed in the United States. When Sojourner Truth said, "Ain't I woman?" in 1851, she was talking about the erasure of her womanhood and her Blackness as a woman. And so there's there's historic trauma around that. I think we have to heal around that. And so I think a lot of Black women see trans women and feel the history of that disavowal of Black womanhood. And there's a pain and trauma there. I think hurt people hurt people. So we have to contend with how we've been hurt. And what I would say to Black men is that your attraction to us is not a reason to kill us. Your attraction to us is not a reason to kill us. But I think what I would say to our community is that this It is not an affront to the race that I exist. Trans people, LGBTQ people have always existed, and we're pushed to the margins. Now we're coming forward and able to live in the light, and that is not, it doesn't diminish our blackness, it doesn't diminish the community. It's a celebration. I come with my blackness, with my womanhood, and my transness, and my blackness is informed by our rich, beautiful history of Black excellence, and I stand in that. Yes. And we need our community to stand with us.
These amazing shows would not have been possible without the work of Ernestine Eckstein, our next pioneer. Ernestine Dolores Eppenberger, an outspoken activist for LGBTQ rights, was born in Indiana on April 23, 1941. Early on in her career of vocal activism, she took on the surname Eckstein to keep her safe in circles where it wasn't common to be open with her sexuality. A leader of the New York chapter of the Daughters of Bilitis, the first lesbian civil rights and political organization in the U.S., Eckstein fought not only for LGBTQ rights, but as an early activist of the Black feminist movement of the 1970s. Eckstein was involved in the Black Women Organized for Action organization. With her passing in 1992, historical documentation seems to relay that Eckstein viewed the fight for civil and LGBTQ rights as intrinsically linked. And that view is what propelled her activism on multiple fronts throughout her life. Another amazing activist voice of the same generation as Eckstein was Barbara Jordan. Barbara Charlene Jordan was born in Texas on February 21, 1936. Living there most of her life, Jordan became a lawyer, educator, and political leader in the civil rights movement. She was the first African American elected to the Texas Senate in 1966, and the first Black woman from the South to be elected to the U.S. Representatives in 1972. In 1974, Jordan delivered a speech on the impeachment process of President Nixon that highlighted the importance of the Constitution, checks and balances, and was regarded as one of the greatest speeches of the 20th century. Barbara was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Clinton in 1994 for her lifetime of work as a political trailblazer. Jordan lived with her partner Nancy Earl for nearly 40 years until her own passing in 1996. Let's listen to a portion of that famous and very timely impeachment speech Jordan gave in 1974 regarding the crimes of Nixon.
James Madison again at the Constitutional Convention. A president is impeachable if he attempts to subvert the Constitution. The Constitution charges the President with the task of taking care that the laws be faithfully executed. And yet, the President has counseled his aides to commit perjury, willfully disregard the secrecy of grand jury proceedings, conceal surreptitious entry, attempt to compromise a federal judge, while publicly displaying his cooperation with the processes of criminal justice. A president is impeachable if he attempts to subvert the Constitution. If the impeachment provision in the Constitution of the United States will not reach the offenses charged here, then perhaps that 18th century Constitution should be abandoned to a 20th century paper shredder.
Another pioneer who made great strides towards equality impacting the nation as a whole was Ron Oden. Ron Oden was born in Michigan on March 21, 1950. He was a politician and the first LGBTQ African American to be elected mayor of Palm Springs, California in 2003. As a result of this election, Oden made further history as the first LGBTQ Black mayor to be elected in any U.S. city. Openly bisexual, Oden's example has impacted the nation as a whole and opened the doors for LGBTQ politically aspirational individuals everywhere. A stellar example of this following his groundbreaking election 17 years prior, the Palm Springs City Council made history once more. In December of 2017, it became America's first all-LGBTQ city council. Take a look at Ron Oden speaking about police brutality in the Black community on the Brian Gallo podcast, Do Your Part.
That people who thought that this doesn't happen. I've never had a police officer stop me and do this. And so they couldn't wrap their minds around this reality. The one thing that they did, that this thing did, is that it showed not only the officer, but he knew the cameras were rolling.
Looking the camera right in the lens.
Looking right in there, like,
yeah.
What?
Like another day in the job.
Yeah. What do you think is going to happen to me? Nothing's going to happen to me. Because this life does not matter. I'm the one who matters. That's what we live with every day. That's what we've lived with for generations. That's why we have to have the talk with our children. Tell your young, primarily boys, but girls too, that when the police stop you, you're always respectful. You say yes, you say no, or yes sir, or no sir. You look them in the eye. You don't make any sudden movements. If you have to do something, you talk to them before you move. I mean, you go through the whole thing. And yet, even when you do that, you can end up dead. Mm-hmm. That's the point that people don't understand.
Another groundbreaking individual who has and continues to inspire cultural change is Billy Porter. Billy Porter is an actor and singer, was born on September 21st, 1969 in Pittsburgh, PA. Porter developed a love for the multifaceted methods of expression available through the performative arts at a young age, starring in a number of productions throughout school until graduation from Carnegie Mellon School of Drama, and eventually transforming that love of performance into a storied Broadway career. Recipient of the Tony Award for Best Actor in a Musical in 2013 for his performance of Lola in Kinky Boots, Porter attributes the role to cracking open his feminine side to confront toxic masculinity. Currently starring on the television series Pose, in 2019, Porter became the first openly gay black man to be nominated and win in any lead acting category for the Primetime Emmys. Let's take a look at Billy's historic Emmy win.
And once again, we witness history unfold. The Emmy goes to Billy Porter.
Oh my God, God bless you all. The category is love, y'all, love. I am so overwhelmed and I am so overjoyed to have lived long enough to see this day. James Baldwin said, took many years of vomiting up all the filth that I had been taught about myself and halfway believed before I could walk around this earth like I had the right to be here. I have the right, you have the right, we all have the right.
Our next pioneer is a political trailblazer. Andrea Jenkins was born on May 10, 1961 in Chicago. She was raised by a single mother in what she called a low-income working-class community. She would grow up to pursue an extensive education, earning a bachelor's degree from Metropolitan State University and 2 master's degrees, one in creative writing and the other in community economic development. And lastly, completing Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government program for senior executives in state and local government as a David Bonnet LGBTQ Victory Institute Leadership Fellow. In her professional life, she would spend a decade working for the Hennepin County government, 12 years as a staff member of the Minneapolis City Council, and then take on the position of curator of the Transgender Oral History Project at the University of Minnesota's Jean Nicklaus-Tretter Collection in Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Studies. In November of 2017, Jenkins became the first openly transgender black woman elected to public office in the United States as a Minneapolis City Council member. Here's Andrea in an interview discussing the disparities and disenfranchisement in the trans community.
The number one issue facing transgender people, and I would say predominantly transgender women of color, is murder, right? So far this year in 2018, there have been 24 trans identified. 26 now. Maybe 20. I mean, the number continuously rises every day. Mm-hmm. But what is causing some of those issues is homelessness, which is dictated by lack of access to employment, healthcare. And so these are the challenges that are facing transgender people in Minneapolis and all around the country.
Born in the same generation but expressing activisms through a different means was Essex Hemphill. Hemphill was a poet born in Chicago on April 16, 1957. Hemphill was enamored with poetic expression from a young age, and that passion carried over into adulthood. Chronicled in many self-published works and finally garnering national attention from his appearance in the anthology In the Life, a collection of writings by Black gay men of the mid-1980s. As Hemphill continued to write, his poems became prominent features of award-winning documentaries like Tongues Untied and Looking for Langston. Beyond these features, Hemphill went on to win multiple awards for his writings, including the Lambda Literary Award for his work, Brother to Brother. With the acclaim garnered from his poetry, he turned his voice toward activism, urging conversations and community involvement towards a no-holds-barred handling of HIV/AIDS, race, and identity issues of the nation. Dying from complications of AIDS in 1995 at the young age of 38, Hemphill's activism and poetic legacy were honored by the induction on the National LGBTQ Wall of Honor within the Stonewall National Monument. Here are excerpts from a powerful poem Hemphill recorded for No, the Rape documentary.
You judge a woman by the length of her skirts, by the way she walks, talks, looks, and acts. By the color of her skin you judge, and you plunge into her veins, travel wildly through her blood, confuse her mind, make her hate, and be cold to the men to come, destroying the thread of calm she held. Ask and she gives, take without asking, beat on her and she'll obey, throw her name up and down the streets like some loose whistle, knowing her neighbors will talk. Her friends will chew her name, her family's blood will run loose like a broken creek. And when you're gone, a woman is left healing her wounds alone. But we, so-called men, we so-called brothers, wonder why it's so hard to love our women when we're about loving them the way America loves us.
In a more modern anthology or collection of amazing voices toward a singular work comes Janet Mock, Dominic Jackson, India Moore, MJ Rodriguez, Angelica Ross, and Haley Sahar, stars of the hit TV show Pose. The stunning writer and cast of the award-winning drama series Pose from FX is comprised of 6 transgender stars from all different generations and backgrounds. Writer and producer Janet Mock was born on March 10, 1983. Dominic Jackson, born on March 20th, 1975. India Andrea Moore, born January 17th, 1995. Michaela Antonio J. Rodriguez, known as MJ Rodriguez, born January 7th, 1991. Angelica Ross, born November 28th, 1980. And Haley Sahar, who was born on July 12th, 1988. Star is a part of the amazing cast of Pose. This group has made television history and continues to do so for their portrayal of various complex characters and pivotal social scenes of New York's Black and Latino, LGBTQ, gender non-conforming drag ball culture scene of the 1980s, the very same culture that is home to many other pioneers on this list. With Pose garnering critical acclaim and numerous awards, including the Golden Globe for Best Television Series Drama, as well as the previously mentioned award for Billy Porter, these 6 pioneers continue to use their platform to make history by furthering the conversations on a culture of transphobia, transgender rights, non-binary attributions, and the trans experience. Let's take a look at another historic night where Janet Mock and the women of Pose are honored by Essence's Black Women in Hollywood.
Essence remains a vital intervention, choosing to see us how we see ourselves in a culture that rarely ever does. Thank you for always seeing us. It isn't lost on us that so many of our sisters, siblings, and forebears are rarely, if ever, given this kind of affirmation. As Black trans women who are aware that our life expectancy is 35, whose own womanhood and humanity is too often questioned, who resist racism, misogyny, and transphobia, to be given the stage today, tells all our sisters watching that no matter their path to womanhood, that they are deserving of being seen, affirmed, and heard.
Looking back much further toward the turn of the 20th century, our next pioneer was an artist that helped set the musical stage for those to come. He was Billy Strayhorn. William Thomas Strayhorn was born in Dayton, Ohio on November 29, 1915, and died on May 31, 1967 at the age of 51. To overcome the struggles of a tumultuous childhood, Strayhorn turned to music and continued to use it as a means of combating both inner and outer hardships. Developing a love for jazz, Strayhorn became a composer, lyricist, pianist, and arranger who impressed Duke Ellington so much at the age of 23 that he was hired on the spot. In a collaborative partnership that lasted 29 years, Strayhorn and Ellington created hit records such as Take the A Train and the groundbreaking musical Jump for Joy. Using his platform from music and branching out to his own, Strayhorn turned to activism as he walked alongside Martin Luther King Jr. fighting for civil rights as an openly gay black man. His contributions to music and LGBT culture had him honored in 2015 on Chicago's Legacy Wall. Here's the musical stylings of Billy Strayhorn on the piano accompanying Duke Ellington and his orchestra.
Strayhorn.
Like others on our list, our next pioneer was perhaps one of the greatest writers of the 20th century. Lorraine Hansberry was born in Chicago on May 19, 1930. Hansberry was raised by activist parents who took a powerful stand against discrimination, waging an important legal battle that challenged housing segregation. Through her first-hand experience of the trial and legal war, Hansberry transformed the injustice into her most famous work, A Raisin in the Sun. The title inspired by Langston Hughes' poem, Harlem, What Happens to a Dream Deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? A writer and playwright, Hansberry was the first African-American woman author to have a play performed on Broadway. She was also the first to win New York Drama Critics Circle Award at only 29 years old. A member of the Daughters of Bilitis, one of the earliest New York lesbian organizations, Hansberry wrote entries in the latter as well as unpublished letters in One magazine urging gay men to accept feminists. Married and a closeted lesbian most of her life, Hansberry came out a few years before her death at the young age of 34, vowing to create my life, not just accept it. And last on my list of LGBTQ pioneers, but certainly never least, is RuPaul Andre Charles. RuPaul Andre Charles, the world-famous actor, singer, songwriter, model, television personality, and self-proclaimed Queen of Drag, was born on November 17, 1960 in California. RuPaul began to study performing arts at the age of 15, and the years that followed, RuPaul struggled to find a foothold in 1980s, but found success with the dance track hit Supermodel, You Better Work. Charting on the Billboard Top 100 and playing consistently on MTV. From there on, RuPaul continued to garner mainstream success and fame, self-proclaimed as the Queen of Drag with the creation of the TV show RuPaul's Drag Race and subsequent awards of 8 primetime Emmys over the years. RuPaul is considered the most commercially successful drag queen in the world. Additionally, the success of the RuPaul's stardom and a television personality has brought drag culture to the mainstream in several other countries, giving a platform and stepping stone to fame for dozens of other drag queens from all over the country and the world. Here's a couple of clips of Ru being their iconic self.
Oh, Chad, darling, I'm a married man.
You're a man?
Did you not know that?
No.
Huh. The look is only half the battle. Now, you need to own it. Baby, it is time to feel the fantasy. Like this.
Stroll down the runway, another payday, cover of magazine.
The advice I give to someone who feels alone is that, first of all, feelings are not facts. You know, what you feel is an indicator, but a lot of times it's not really the truth, because the truth is we are not separate from one another. We are actually one thing. We are one thing, but from your perception is makes you think, and your ego makes you think that we're two different things, that you're over there and I'm over here. But the truth is, we are actually one thing together.
Still only representing a small segment of the many voices, both heard and unheard, of the Black LGBTQ community, these pioneers have made strides across decades and even centuries fighting for equality, a voice, a place, and one another. While these short summaries can do little to contain the wonderful nuances, struggles, and triumphs, and persevering steps taken to create these amazing lives, we hope they do well to encourage the further exploration of the lessons that these pioneers offer. I hope that these paths through adversity that their lives took, or the roads that they continue to walk, inspire those who face the same struggles today and offer understanding to those who don't. Thank you for joining me in this two-part special on Black LGBTQ pioneers. Remember to love yourselves and love each other. Ru, can you close me out?
Now, sashay away.